Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Babes in Bookland. Today, I'm going to be discussing Viola Davis's Finding Me with my good friend, Nok Ann. So happy you're here. Hi, Nok Ann, or NA as we all call you.
Hi, Al.
Thanks for doing this with me.
Of course.
Let's get to it. Finding Me was published in 2022, so a recent book, and this is her dedication. This book is dedicated to my husband, Julius, daughter, Genesis, sisters, Diane, Dolores, Anita, and Danielle, mom, May Alice, and dad, Dan. Viola Davis is an EGOT. Do you know what an EGOT is, Nay?
Mm-hmm.
For people who don't know, do you want to explain it?
Somebody who's actually won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and a Tony.
So she was the 18th person to achieve this. She won her Emmy for How to Get Away with Murder. She won the Oscar for Fences. She won the Tony for King Hedley II. And then she also won a second Tony for Fences. And then she won her Grammy for the narration of her memoir. So that's pretty cool. Nice little full circle moment for her. What did you think of this book?
Well, with this book, I got through about half. It was actually a little bit of a struggle for me because it actually is it can be triggering if you have your own, stuff to work through, but it's also very inspiring.
The AP actually called this book a blistering memoir, which I felt was just right on because exactly like you said, it kind of reminds you of maybe some of the work that you still have yet to do, but you can feel very inspired by her journey to do the really, really difficult work of unpacking trauma and choosing to purposefully navigate through trauma in order to have hopefully a better life for yourself and for the people around you. This book broke my heart. It provided incredible perspective to growing up as a poor Black woman and specifically one who pursued a career in the arts. She has so much grace and compassion for her family. And honestly, it humbled me and it made me really reflect on what I'm holding on to and why. I feel like her story is so poignant and it's obvious that she's worked really hard to figure out who she is and find her capital V is what we called it in theater school voice. Yeah, this book kind of just cracks you open though. You have to be prepared. And I said, do you want a book that will crack you open in A?
Because I asked for it. But it was really great because it just kind of reminded me about, even from the outside, working with children who are survivors of trauma and working with domestic violence victims and, previously with CPS and children in the system. It was actually quite frustrating just knowing that however many decades ago, all of this could have flown on their radar. But nowadays, she would have gotten the help she needed, or at least somebody would have intervened.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you a lot more about that when we get to it in the book. So I'm so excited that you brought that up. But before we get into all of our deep topics, I have a little segment called Quick Topics. So we'll start with those. Now, she starts the book with the word cocksucker motherfucker. Which was like kind of amazing and sort of like really set you up for what you were about to go through. And I love me a good curse word. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, I definitely feel like sometimes there just isn't a way to really get your point across without the word fuck. Yeah, I love it.
Or it helps you release something too. Like when something hurts, you yell shit or damn instead of just being like, ow. It just feels better.
Gravy or raspberries. Yep.
Raspberries. Who the heck is hurting themselves and being like, oh, raspberries? I'm going to try that actually. Okay, so I guess this one gets, these quick topics are usually supposed to be light, but Viola Davis's book is not really light. So even some of the quick topics are a little bit heavier. She starts her book with this bullying story. She talks about running away from the white boys at the beginning and actually one Black boy who would not allow other people to call him Black, even though he was. She runs away from them and they chase her almost every day. And one day they catch her because she's forced to run in these shoes that have holes in them. And so she tries to take her shoe off and it's cold and they catch her and she comes home and she's crying. And her mom gives her a crochet needle and she says to jug them or stab them if they bother you again. And she says, don't come back here crying about the boys or I'll whoop your ass. And I wanted to know, because I don't think I know this, did you experience bullying? And if so, did your parents offer advice or what?
I didn't experience that type of bullying. It was more so kind of those microaggressions with race, you know what I mean? And I didn't
Oh,
realize it until I got older. But bullying, I feel like it's also the circumstances, because I definitely was lucky enough to grow up in a very like middle class suburb. And so I had friends who would be bullied, or I'd hear stories about friends who got bullied where they would actually hear the same thing. Their moms would be like, if you're gonna fight with somebody, you better freaking win. Don't come to me
yeah.
crying about it. You know, so it's kind of teaching them because they're coming out of an environment of survival. So I never got bullied in that way. We were basically latchkey kids. So if I ever did get bullied or scraped a knee, I would actually hide it from my parents because we didn't want to get in trouble. We just didn't want to feel like we were causing trouble when they weren't home, because we just had to be the perfect kids and obedient. We didn't want to stir that up, even though we were doing stuff we shouldn't.
Do you feel like your parents wouldn't have believed you if basically you came to your mom and you said, so and so is treating me unfairly? Do you think that she would have believed you, or do you think she would have said, well, what are you doing?
Depends on the circumstance. You know, if I ever felt like I was being treated unfairly, like in school by a teacher, because that definitely did happen, I wouldn't tell my mom. I just didn't confide in them in that way because I feel like we were kind of left on our own to deal with that stuff. Also because of the language barrier, being children of immigrants, kind of just like they don't even know what it means. Just want you to get the good grades and that's it. So it's always surface level achievement, but never really focused on your actual experience as a student, you know. And if I got hurt or anything, then of course they would be really upset about it, but I don't know what they would do to help or anything. I don't know.
You brought up this thing with your teachers. So what did you do?
Honestly, I actually kind of acted like Viola. I actually ended up being snarky and I gave extra attitude because ultimately, and at my school, it wasn't really a race thing. It was kind of the certain teachers were coaches, and so they favored the jocks.
Oh,
And so in class, I felt like I was treating differently. And so then the teachers would call me out in front of everybody. And I was like, that's fine. And then they'd be like, oh, see you at the final. I'm like, okay, because I made straight A's in the class. So she was catching me for being late to class or skipping class. But I'm like, I still got an A, so you can't really come at me.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like, what
seriously.
are you going to do? What are you going to
You're like,
do?
and what?
Yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh.
maybe not as extreme as Viola because she
Yeah,
was dying for attention, you know, but
right.
for me, it was kind of like, you can't really get me. My parents aren't around to regulate.
That seems like such an adult way to view the world, because I was so afraid of getting into trouble all the time. I would have just like totally like kowtowed to whatever. I was so scared to disappoint people because of my growing up situation. I think being a child of divorce, you just want to like be perfect for everyone all the time.
Mhm.
So knowing you now, it's so interesting to just discover these stories and realize how you were shaped to be who you are, which is this
Yeah.
very old soul, wise, that person that we kind of all turn to help us fix things. It's RNA, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there definitely was two sides of it because there was that perfect daughter that I portrayed to my parents, and then the
Yeah.
side that they didn't know. Because we could always, for example, intercept all the letters that were being sent home, forge
And
our report cards.
yeah,
So that's
interesting.
kind of what comes with limited supervision.
Right. And you know, kids can't forge report cards anymore because it's
No,
all electronic.
it's all emailed. Yeah.
Poor
And
kids.
yeah, so now I know that kids are, you know, parents get texts now, and I'm like, oh, you can't intercept that. So
Right. Seriously.
yeah. So there were ways we were clever. That's
That's
why.
right. Definitely. This reminded me too. My parents definitely did not teach me to meet violence with violence, but I remember my uncle telling my cousin to never throw the first punch, but make sure you always threw the last,
Hmm.
which is very
That's
intense. I
okay.
mean, my
Okay.
cousin is like my age and she was a strong girl. She played softball, but I was like, whoa, what does that even look like throwing a punch? So you know, everybody has their way. As far as I know, she never had to throw a punch. I don't think she would have, but I think that can be applied to life in a less violent way as well. Make sure you know your shit so that you can get the last word, basically.
Hmm.
And I do think it's really important for women and young girls to be able to physically defend themselves if they need to.
Hmm.
So I can appreciate starting that conversation early, but I feel like we should avoid violence as often as possible. Okay, so the last quick topic is her Juilliard audition story. Did you get to this part in the book?
I was just getting there. Yeah,
Okay.
because she was talking about like auditioning for Juilliard and as one of the schools that she was recommended to go, but I didn't actually get to the actual audition.
So she ends up applying just to Juilliard because she only had the money for one application.
Hmm.
And the story is so incredible. When I read this, being an actress myself, I was like, oh my gosh, only Viola Davis could get away with this. So basically, she's in a play And she knows she has to go down to audition for Juilliard. And she's like, okay, I have a performance tonight, but my audition is in the morning. I'll take the train, I'll do my audition, and I'll come back. She had no idea that the audition process for a school like Juilliard is typically a 3-day process. It's basically kind of like American Idol, where there's all these levels. So she goes down, she does her audition, she also talks about how she's wearing very of the time clothing, kind of loud, like she's sort of dressed as herself, and everybody else is dressed in all black because when you typically audition for something, you want to like be able to, melt into the character. They typically have you audition a classical monologue and a contemporary monologue. So you're playing a Shakespeare role and whomever from the John Patrick Shanley's play or whatever. But she's basically like walks into the room, she does her thing, and she's like, so I have to go. Like, am I in? And they're all like, what? Who are you? Basically, they realize her time crunch. And because she's so good, they kind of gather everybody and they're like, watch this woman. And she blows them away, as we know, because she is Viola Davis. She ends up getting into Juilliard. But it's just so funny because she just had no idea. And it made me think of the things that we do in life when we have no expectations of the way it's supposed to be, or even when we're like too naive to know. Do you have anything in your life that you can think of where you just kind of blissfully floated your way in because you didn't realize that you needed to knock at the door or whatever?
No, I think in the large scope of things, it's life that I kind of blissfully thought was the harsh reality of just life in general. But in my experience, everything I feel like being an anxious person, everything I've done, I've been over prepared for. So I've always researched, I've always made sure that I had things in order. I kind of had a general idea of what the job was, what I was doing. So, but at the same time, I've never done anything that's passion oriented, something that's artistic like that. So I can see how that could be so different depending on what setting you're at.
Yeah.
So in my situation, it's more very concrete, black and white type jobs. Yeah, I think it's just life that kind of caught me off guard. Life is a lot harder than you expect. As you get older, you're kind of realizing the reality of things that you kind of didn't think about as a kid.
Definitely.
Pandemic, that's probably something that I had no idea walking into that.
Right. None of us did.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But no, I this is why I really admire people that go for things that are just so high stakes, because I'm such an anxious person that I've never taken a risk like that. So for me, I find that admirable because I didn't have the luxury of that. I've always learned that you have to do something that's practical to get paid. And because immigrant family, they want you to be successful because you're representing the reason why they came here.
Your sister was able to pursue a passion.
Oh, she had to fight for it. She definitely didn't. Yeah. She wasn't allowed to.
I know.
Yeah, she was not allowed to.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. And especially because you and your sister had to grow up so quickly and kind of learn resilience on your own and grow up together. And I know you were a big maternal figure for her. I totally get that idea of stability and having stability be one of the most important things. And, she grapples with that a lot in this book. It's almost like having the privilege to pursue your passion as a career. You can have a financial privilege, right? You can be set up by your family, maybe have a safety net, that sort of thing. That's where I wondered where she found it within her. And it's almost like, because that's just who she was. If she didn't choose acting, then she wouldn't be anymore. And I totally resonated with that because choosing a career path in the arts is absolutely insane. And it's really difficult. And you're constantly teetering on the edge of losing it, honestly, every day. But I just don't feel like I would be alive without it. It's like a curse and a blessing. Obviously, I have a lot of privilege to be able to continue to pursue that career and to pursue this fun, creative outlet with my friends and talk about these wonderful women. I feel like it's so interesting where Viola comes from, her circumstances, how she was able to get over the fear of choosing a life that she could have failed. I mean, she didn't. We know that now, but she could have easily been another actor who is still trying to pursue their passions, but is working waiting tables or bartending or doing whatever they have to do, who doesn't have representation. It sort of reminds me of Sister Act 2 when the mom is like about the dad and she's like, he's on the street singing his coulda, woulda, shouldas,
Yeah.
and Lauryn Hill's like, I just want to sing, mom. And
Yeah.
she's like, no. So it's so hard. It's so hard to take that leap. But I think if it's something like you said, you didn't really have a passion that like dragged you to this place of needing to try it, or else you feel like you would go insane.
Yeah, for her, it was definitely like an outlet, but I loved how she said that her dreams were just bigger. They were just bigger than her circumstances, because she said that several times. And that's where I was just like, dang, I don't think I even had a chance to dream that big. But it's because she was also left to her own devices. Her sisters were in survival mode, her mom and dad were going through so much. And so she lived in her own world, as a child, the child's mind.
Yeah, her childhood. I guess that's a really good segue to get into that, to the deeper discussion topic. So, really, the thing that sets the entire journey in motion, I think why she ultimately wrote this book, is Will Smith, of all people. She's on the set of Suicide Squad, and Will Smith apparently came up to her and was like, Viola, who are you? And she's like, what do you mean, Will? Like, I'm Viola Davis. We're making a movie together. And he's like, no, no, no. Who are you? And then he gives her an example of how he will always be the high school boy whose girlfriend broke up with him. And so I wondered, Hene, who are you?
I was really thinking about this, because from a psychological standpoint, happiness is the fulfillment of a childhood wish, right? And so some part of us is always trying to meet the needs of that inner child. So I feel like who I am, I can't pinpoint a specific time in my life, but I guess I'm still that kid. You know what's sad? I'm still that kid trying to seek my parents' approval.
Yeah.
Even at 40, oh my gosh, Yeah, I think some part of me is still that kid trying to seek my parents' approval and just to get them to tell me I did a good job and I did okay. Even though at an intellectual level, I know I'm fine and I've done a lot of things and I've kind of made it as far as like I'm better off than my parents are. So I'm not struggling. I'm in a comfortable place in my life. But it's so weird that you always revert back to that. I mean, who do you think you are?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this too. And I think that I am the sixth grader whose parents are getting divorced, who feels like there's nobody in the world who understands what I'm going through. I had a lot of wonderful friends at that time who are still my friends to this day, but it was such an isolating and lonely situation. Everything that's happened from there, I feel like that was such a turning point in my life about how I viewed the world, how I viewed relationships, how I viewed myself, my emotional intelligence. And I've had to work really hard to unpack some of those things and relearn some of those things, how to deal with some of those things. But yeah, I think that a part of me will just always be that sixth grader. And I was younger than most people in my grade too. So there's that on top of everything. Like I just felt so unsure of who I was and so uncomfortable in my skin. And then my life at home was changing so much. So interesting that as adults, that thing that you said about getting back to our inner child and wanting to make our inner child happy. I mean, Viola Davis says that she will always be that third grader running from the bullies, which is why she tells a story in the first chapter of the book. And it makes me now as a mom want to figure out a way for my daughter to not have any of these moments, maybe.
It's anxiety provoking, isn't it?
It is. It's a big
pivotal
responsibility.
yeah.
To be a parent. You just really don't want to fuck them up and like, but like you are human.
Well, we're all fucked up to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Just do better.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that's a big point of this book too, that Viola talks about is stopping generational trauma. And feels like she's successful because she worked, but some of her siblings were maybe not as successful in doing that. And that's definitely been a big theme through quite a few of these memoirs that I'm dipping my toes into, which is really interesting. Now, the term generational trauma feels like a newer term. Yeah, I feel like you would know that more than I would.
Yeah, it's actually, I don't know about how new it is, but it's definitely a common thing that we discuss in the psychological realm, the intergenerational transmission of trauma. A lot of it is talked about in the context of like, racial community and how even the traumas of people that not only are in your family, but just in your community, the trauma that's passed on. And it's weird because it's not necessarily something that you experience directly, but somehow it's like in our bones,
Wow.
And it's passed down potentially by how our parents inadvertently treat us due to that trauma, or witnessing it and then repeating those patterns. I definitely see that in my own family.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the way that minorities tend to parent their children. So that is definitely a struggle for me, thinking about my future child and how I want to parent them and what I would want to carry forward and what I would not want to. But yes, that is definitely a real thing. And the whole idea of just trauma lives in the body,
I think what's so important is you're already so aware of all that. And like things are going to happen, old wounds pop up, but then it's how you address it. With my daughter, if I become impatient, or if something that she does or says triggers me in a way that like I kind of didn't realize and I snap or something, I take a deep breath and I get down to her level and I say, that was not cool that mommy just did that. That is not on you. That is on me. And I take full responsibility of that. Nobody's perfect. Parents aren't perfect. And so I'm trying to like get ahead of that with my own kids and be like, yo, just so you know, nobody's perfect. None of us are perfect. You don't have to strive for perfection. It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that transparency it's so good to model that for your children,
Yeah.
And just to have honest conversations. I think the apologizing and the ownership of what you do is the best thing you can do is model for your kids.
Yeah.
You can't tell them to be perfect if you're imperfect yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what we were missing. My parents would tell me one thing, but they would act another. So we knew that as children. Children aren't dumb. Children are very perceptive and very smart. You tell them don't do this, but you're doing it yourself. That's not really teaching them anything.
Right. Right. Well, let's get into her parents a little bit more. Viola and her mother have a really interesting relationship. And one thing that I thought was really interesting, and I think spoke a lot to who her mother was right off the bat, was that Viola's mother named one of Viola's sisters after an aunt of Viola's that had passed away. It's a horrible, tragic story. Viola's mom was 3 years old when she was tasked with taking care of her little brother and her infant sister. They were playing with the fire and the house caught fire, and Viola's mom was able to bring her little brother out, but she couldn't get to the baby because she was 3. So the baby died. And Viola's mother is punished for this. I believe it says that she was whipped. I mean, horrible way to put that responsibility on a toddler, on an infant. I mean, 3 years old is still, my daughter is now 5, but even at 5, I wouldn't trust her with that. And I understood that that's where the circumstances the parents had to work. But I thought it was so interesting that Viola's mother named her own daughter after the sister that she felt the burden and responsibility of her life being taken.
Again, it's like the child's mind, right? She didn't have the tools to understand what happened and how it wasn't her fault. And she's not having any kind of adults tell her and process the meaning of what happened, So in some weird way that could, one, be punishing herself, or two, breathing new life into her sister. I don't know, maybe that was her weird way of processing it.
Yeah. And Viola encourages her to forgive herself. She writes that she knows that she never will. Viola and her sisters also experience sexual abuse at the hand of her brother. And Viola tells this story where she's sitting in her kitchen later in life. And she writes, Dolores, Anita, Diane, and I were sexually abused, I told her mother, as I uttered my brother's name in the same breath. She gives her mom more detail, and she writes, there was silence. She didn't move. It's ironic that she was sitting in my beautiful kitchen of marble and porcelain with the sub-zero refrigerator and the high ceilings, and it meant absolutely fucking nothing compared to the largeness of the truth of what was happening. Success pales in comparison to healing. Not just the truth of the abuse, but the decision to love, to forgive, what I knew the reaction would be, which was silence. Dude, I'm tearing up just rereading this. When she talked about this part, because obviously this thing that she experienced at the hands of caregivers, at the hands of family members, is unimaginable. And the fact that she still chooses love and compassion and empathy for her mother, knowing that her mother is incapable of apologizing, and that being enough for Viola. I mean, the strength that this woman exudes in this book and in these moments. I know you're tearing up too.
I don't know. I literally cried so hard when I hit that point.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I honestly don't have that level of strength. There's a lot of things that I personally want to tell my mom one day. And I always tell myself that it's like, what would the purpose of that be? Because honestly, saying certain things to her would hurt her, but it wouldn't heal me. So what's the point of saying it?
Yeah.
Clearly, this is also the result of many years of therapy. She's done the work
Yeah.
to get to that point. And in her heart, she already forgave her mom. There was no expectation of a response.
Yeah.
That's the thing. For me, if I were to tell my mom something like that, I would want an apology. There's an expectation there. But for me, I'm still grappling with the idea that I will never get an apology for the things that we went through,
Yeah.
And so that just took so much courage from her. And this is one of the moments in the book where I was just so impressed by her as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She writes also, the only weapon I have to blast through it all is forgiveness. It's giving up all hope of a different past. I had never thought of it that way before, because for me, the problems that I have with my own mother is the hope of a different past. And like the past has already happened and you can't change it. I just had never seen it spelled out so succinctly before
Yeah.
that it just made me be like, oh, yeah, duh.
It feels so
It
obvious,
feels so
right?
obvious.
Yeah, because for me, even now, it's like I sometimes talk about how if my mom would just apologize, I would forgive everything
Yeah.
just to know that she acknowledges. But it's one of those things where she acts like she was the greatest mother ever and she never did anything wrong. And so we just continue to sweep things under the rug. But it's an ongoing thing, and it's one of those things that forgiveness truly is. It's something that you want to strive for because it really does give you peace, and it's really huge. And forgiveness is so hard. I'm realizing that in adulthood, I can let things go very easily, and I tend to not really get angry about things. But forgiveness for the big things, I thought I was over it, but it turns out no, I haven't really forgiven because I still remember and I still react.
Yeah. Girl, I'm a Scorpio. I hold grudges. In the end, I'm the one who, because I'm holding on to these things, like I'm the one who's suffering more,
Yeah.
Like it's just so. This also, and I've talked to your sister about this a lot, but somewhere in this phrase also is the idea of letting go of all hope of a different future. You're talking about your mom apologizing one day and not sweeping things under the rug. And I have certain situations with my parents that I hope that they'll be people who they just aren't anymore. And that's kind of a big thing for me too, because I have a lot of anger with who I wish that they could be, who I need them to be, that they just aren't. And so to me, that's a big thing, letting go of that. And I know that anybody can change and like the future is the future, but people don't change sometimes. And you either have to be okay with it, or this is why found family is just as important as the family that you're born into, because you need those people. That's, we're here together going through it. Okay, so she has so much love for her sisters. She writes, my sisters became my platoon. We were all in a war, fighting for significance. Each of us was a soldier fighting for our value, our worth. Some battles we won, survived together, and emerged with laughter and perspective. And some brutal ones, sexual abuse, we lost. And she gives a few other examples in the book of the way that she and her sisters were groped by strange men in very public situations. She talks about being at a birthday party and being chased by a man who grabs her crotch and carries her, and everyone's just laughing.
And the kid's like, haha, you got caught. I'm like, my God.
I could not believe that this was acceptable at this time.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but when I was little and, like some uncles are creepy, sometimes they would just kind of joke that, oh, he's just a creepy uncle or he's just pervy. And they would say it so casually. I don't know what that teaches girls about consent and
what is casual about somebody being pervy?
And autonomy over your own body. And this is something I'm hyper aware about now because it's like adults they pinch kids' cheeks and like they might playfully slap your butt, things like that. Those things, it's like kind of like, okay, well, how far are you going to go with that? So I'm very cognizant about that, about my own nieces and nephews, where I, if they see me, I don't expect them to hug me, but you just got to show respect in your own way. Greet me however you want. You shouldn't make kids feel like they have to hand over their body to somebody. They have to show affection if they don't feel comfortable. That just weirds me out. And I'm just thinking back and I'm kind of like, man, the messages I heard were kind of like that, where they would just brush it off. If he's like, oh, he's just being silly, I would totally hear that as a kid.
I'm uncomfortable though. Like, what about me? Who cares if uncle feels whatever, like by touching
and the parents
me?
would kind of be like, oh, she's just sensitive. That's totally a message I would hear as a kid. Not to the extreme of Viola's instance, because straight up crotch grab is very blatantly not okay.
Yeah. I don't want my daughter to feel like she's sensitive if she doesn't want some random person touching her body. No, like that should be
Yeah.
baseline. But it's so true growing up, like you're told to like,
Like hug your uncle or hug your auntie. You say hi, you have to.
I now tell my daughter when people go bye, I'm like, you don't have to give them a hug. You can wave or you can give them a high five, and that's fine. Like, you don't have to hug everyone. It's interesting how much we push for that. And believe me, I love hugging. Like, I'm a hugger, but not everybody is that way. And everybody has their own
Hmm.
reasons for being so. And I think it's just nice to respect people's boundaries. And I think it's very important to respect children's boundaries and to teach children about boundaries.
Hmm.
So, kind of piggybacking on your pervy uncle comment, there's also the story where her little sister Danielle gets touched at a corner store, and her mom goes to the police and goes down to the store. And Viola writes, the guys who owned the store tried to calm my mom down by saying, ma'am, he does this to all the little girls. It's not a big deal. My mom said, it is a big deal, you motherfuckers. But ultimately, no charges were pressed, no jail time. He just had to pay Viola's little sister $9 a month for the next few months as a fine. So disgusting. It just is so reflective of the way that society deemed acceptable, which, let's be real, it was
Oh my
society
gosh.
run by men.
Yeah.
Of course, they wanted to be able to touch little girls however and whenever they wanted. Until we start holding each other accountable, things don't change.
Hmm.
So really wanted to include this story because in the past example, Viola's mom is silent, but like here, she adamantly stands up for her daughter and is basically like,
Hmm.
no, you cannot touch my daughter however you deem fit. I don't care if it's what he just does or whatever. And Viola writes this, which as a mother really struck a chord with me. She writes, your first instinct when you love a child is to protect her from all the pain of the world and life. The most excruciating revelation is when you realize you can't.
Oh my God. That's, yeah, I feel like that's a universal fear for all parents,
Yeah.
especially in a technological age. You want to protect them from everything, but you can't. There's a whole other world that they're involved in that you're not going to know.
You just try your best to give them the best foundation, to make them feel loved, to make them feel like they can come to you with anything, that you will love them no matter what. And I think you have to say those things too. I don't think kids just pick up on it. I think kids can have wonderful, loving parents, but I think it's nice for them to hear, I will love you no matter what. There is nothing you can do, nothing you can tell me that will make me stop loving you. And that really creates a safe space for them to come to you, because that's
Hmm.
sometimes that's all you can provide, is the safe space for them to come to you with the problems and the issues, the pain. No, I want to put her in a bubble forever.
Yeah, I think that that honesty is what we want to foster in the relationship.
Well, let's keep moving on to some more ugliness, unfortunately. Her father was extremely abusive to her mother, almost killing her on multiple occasions. Their marriage was very toxic. He was an alcoholic. Viola writes about one time that he took Viola to his mistress's house and she opened the door butt ass naked and said, don't tell your mom about this. And of course, Viola did. But he changed once he became a grandfather. There are lots of anecdotes in the book. I mean, she does not paint a pretty picture of this man. We're not going to get into all of that for the podcast. Again, this is just an example of her grace and her strength to forgive. She writes, somewhere inside, he was trying to make amends. I think my dad just got tired of the anger, the rage, as an answer to his inner pain. Either you give yourself over to it in a sort of emotional suicide, or you simply just get it. What do I think he got? That he mattered. I think he changed as a way of asking us for forgiveness. And I thought that that was really poignant because I do think that when people feel purposeful, they change. I think people can change. What do you think?
Definitely. You know, in a way, I have to believe that people can change. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a therapist.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
So, core belief of mine is that people can change. You know, there's just certain things that people have different breaking points and they have different motivations for change. And I do definitely try to give my parents the grace of that. You know, like I have the tools to kind of understand why they do what they do, but of course I'm going to go with my knee-jerk reaction and be angry. But I do get it. People aren't happy when they behave that way, or they aren't doing things to purposely. I believe in people as intrinsically good. It's very rare that I believe someone is actually evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just like the Ted Bundys of the world.
Yes, that is just there's something
Psychopaths.
broken. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even then, you can kind of trace it back. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, true.
so, so I believe that people are intrinsically good. And when you behave a certain way or you lash out at people or you do those types of things, I mean, in this case, he was just so abusive, but it's just from his own inner pain and his own inability to have the tools to even label or manage it.
Yeah.
But I kind of see that. I get that because even when I watch like my aunt with her grandchildren, it's so fucked up that they're so different with grandchildren. Because you're like, who the hell are you? She
Nice to meet you. Would have liked this in my
yeah,
life.
yes, super strict when with my cousins. But with the grandchildren, man, she spoils them like crazy. So I think it really is. You're right. It's like the purpose, giving people a purpose, and plus now they're not in survival mode anymore. They're not struggling to make ends meet, and you need to behave so that I can freaking work.
Right.
Now it's just like you just get to enjoy the fun parts of being a parent without the responsibility of raising them.
Yeah. Yeah. Viola's father gets diagnosed with cancer, and she talks about forgiving him at the end of his life. She writes, Dolores, her sister, was crying and spoke words that triggered healing in me. Viola, Dad hasn't really done anything with this life. What were his dreams? My sister asked, crying. What were his hopes? He only had a fifth grade education. What became apparent to me as he was dying was that we were his dream. His children and his grandchildren were his dream. We were their hope. We were the baton they were passing as they were sinking into the quicksand of racism, poverty, Jim Crow, segregation, injustice, family trauma, and dysfunction. Really, really powerful. I think parrot, no, I'm making you cry so much.
I know I'm very hormonal right now. Yeah.
The idea of being this baton of hope that one generation passes to another is so beautiful. And that's exactly what it should be. It's not, hey, we're perfect, we did everything right, but it's like, hey, we know you can do better. And it's weird because I feel like generationally, that's what everyone says they want for their children. But then, like in our society today, feels like older generations are trying to like hold back the growth of newer generations. It's like so strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what is that
Yeah.
about?
The criticism about how spoiled we are. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, we just expect better out of life, okay? We're not willing to accept what you accepted.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about why that got you so emotional or?
It's just the sadness of when I worked for CPS, I saw the effects of poverty and it just broke my heart.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the idea of dying before you even fulfill your dreams or even had a chance to dream at all. So that for me is tragic.
Yeah.
Existentially tragic.
Yeah, no, it is.
And there was a quote in the book that actually said, like, it was just a random quote, and it said something like, "May you live long enough to know your purpose." Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's very true because even, when you work with clients in therapy and things like that, self-actualization, some people die and they never get there. So that's one of those existential truths. In a way, I kind of think about my parents and I kind of hope that, I mean, it was hard because they put all their dreams on us. It wasn't really a baton of hope. It was kind of just fulfill the dreams that we couldn't.
Yeah.
So with that pressure, but at the same time, like as my parents age, I definitely do think about that. I really hope that they achieved happiness and what they wanted to achieve because they were so focused on the superficial aspects of success, one-upping your friends and having a house and being successful and things like that. But I really do hope that they because they're getting closer, they're getting older. So it does make me think about that, life and death and how it's like, did you actually get to fulfill your dreams as well?
Have you ever asked your parents what their dreams were?
No, because I feel like that's such a taboo topic. Weirdly enough, it's one of those things where even when I was talking about a career and the things that I wanted to do when I was younger, I got squashed. I wasn't allowed to dream,
Yeah.
When we think about things like that, then they're just like, you're stupid and immature for thinking that. You don't do things because you like it. You do it because you have to.
Because it is a privilege to dream, right? And in America, we sell that as the American dream. But like your parents
Exactly.
came from a war-torn country.
Exactly. So to them, they see it as like a pipe dream, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, but that's what I grew up hearing, the American dream, the idea of like you dream it and you can do it. And my parents were the ones that ended up squashing my dreams. So that's the struggle.
Yet ironically, they came to America to
Give us a better
and to kind of chase the American dream.
Yeah. I mean, I think Asians are just too freaking practical. Success is kind of concrete. You make enough money and set yourself up for the future. That is success.
Yeah.
for somebody to be like, oh, I want to be a singer, I want to be an actor. At that point, they're like, so you want to be poor?
Right. Right.
You know, because they know the struggle, just
Yeah.
like Viola talked about, you know,
Yeah.
how when she went to that class and the first class, and the guy was talking about like, who wants to be an actor? And she kept her hand raised the entire time, every time he would say all these barriers, like,
Yeah.
who wants to be rejected all the time?
Yeah.
You know, you're going to fail most of the time.
Yep.
It's one of those where it's like, why would you sign up for suffering? That's so impractical.
Yes. I ask myself that question every day in the morning. Why did you
Yeah.
sign up for suffering?
Yeah, so I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, like it definitely affected me as a kid because I just never got to dream as big as Viola. Her dreams were bigger than her circumstances, and I didn't get to do that. Yeah, even for me, I'm kind of thinking like, what was my childhood dream? I can't even remember anymore.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So getting back to Viola's father, this quote, for whatever reason, I don't even know why, because it sort of feels random, but it made me really choke up. She writes, I was witnessing the last breaths of my father. I wasn't thinking of the fights, the abuse, the cheating. I was thinking, this is the man who participated in giving me life. This is my daddy, and I love him. My dad, who only had a fifth grade education, didn't make it into any history books except mine.
Oh,
Like, why am I crying again right now? I don't know why it affected me so much. It's just like, wow, when you think about that, I don't know, like life is so fragile and so quick, and we're only here for such a short
I know.
time, and
This book really makes you
we affect each other so much.
the ripples, right? Like, you know, you
Yeah.
feel like your life is insignificant, but it does cause ripples. Every person you touch, every act of kindness that you pass along to somebody else, you know, even if I didn't have kids, for example, like my nieces and nephews are affected by me. So in some sort of way, I
Yeah.
feel like as human beings, we are chasing some level of immortality,
Yeah.
but we forget that pieces of you do survive. You know, even if you're not famous or you're not in the history books, you know, pieces of you survive because you impacted other people that, you know, butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Maybe you impacted someone in such a way where they end up saving so many lives or they were pushed into a certain career. So I try to remember that sometimes when I feel like, am I doing enough, you know?
Yeah.
Because I never really wanted to be important in that way, but I did want to leave the world better
Yeah.
than I found it, you know?
I think you are. I can say for certain that you are. Believe me. Believe me.
So I think an important reminder, you know, that a parent is literally a god for a kid,
Yeah.
even if you suck at it.
Yeah.
And the fact that she can reflect on it and say that, like, you know what, I loved him. He did what he could, and he still shaped her no matter what,
Yeah.
even if of the horrible experiences. He made her who she is.
Yeah. Yeah. This woman, I'm telling you, she's incredible. She deserves all the good stuff that is happening for her.
All the accolades. I saw her scene in Fences, and I was just like, me and my sister were watching it, bawling. We're like, yeah, she's been through some shit because she is accessing some crazy emotions.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about doubt a little bit later too, but after I read the
Yeah.
memoir, I went back and just watched her one scene, and I mean, we'll get into it, but she's incredible. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit, but Viola grew up poor. Poe, as she says, which is when you're poor and know it. She and her family were living in a condemned house. That made me so angry when the town was basically like, yeah, you guys can live here. It's condemned, but aren't we so nice just giving you this house? I mean, there's like rats everywhere. At some point, there's a fire. And so there's literally like walls missing.
Multiple fires, right? It's
Yeah,
like a fire hazard.
so many issues, so many problems. There's rarely working plumbing. There's no heat. I mean, they can barely cook. It's a horrible situation. Viola talks about how she wet the bed well into her adolescence.
14 or so.
Yeah,
Yeah, 16.
obviously she had a lot of trauma in her life, and they didn't have clothes. They had one or two things to wear, and they didn't have the ability to wash these clothes. Or if they did, they didn't have soap. It was basically just dip it in water, and then there's no heat, so it wouldn't dry overnight.
Mm-hmm.
She writes that they were made to feel ashamed. They basically go to school and the teachers are like, okay, you guys smell. You need to go to the nurse. And the nurse is
Mm-hmm.
like, girls, this is how you wash yourself. And they're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, no, that's not the problem here. She
Mm-hmm.
writes, it's funny that with the complaints about hygiene, no one ever asked us about our home environment. No one asked if we were okay or if anything was wrong. No one talked to us. There was a lack of intentional investment in us little Black girls. A few people would drop what they called useful affirmations like work hard, stay in school and do good, be great, behave and don't get into trouble. There was an expectation of perfectionism without the knowledge of emotional well being. What it left in me was confusion. How do I get up the mountain with no legs? But we constantly push it with kids now. And when you're a poor kid growing up with trauma, no one is equipping you with the tools to do better and to make a life. One of the phrases that I really take a lot of issue with is the pull yourself up by the bootstraps
Oh God.
phrase.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what if they don't have boots?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
She continues, I went home and did everything the nurse said. It gave me such a sense of pride to go back to school the next day, clean. I sat in class with a huge smile on my face and waited to be acknowledged for the change. But I wasn't. None of the teachers who complained ever really noticed us at all after that. You're expected to be clean and not celebrated. The invisibility of the 1-2 punch that is blackness and poverty is brutal. Mix that with being hungry all the damn time, and it becomes combustible. And so I really wanted to spend some time talking about your time as a social worker and the responsibility of the community to recognize what's going on and step in and do something about it. I know that times have changed. This isn't like 10 years ago, but this isn't that long ago. And
It's crazy, right?
and she's so aware of it. I mean, she was just the little black girl that they basically like tolerated
Yeah.
in their community of white people.
Yeah. She really did live in a little bubble, right? Because of what city she was in and maybe the resources that that city had, you know, that would definitely not fly nowadays. When I read that, it just really made me angry because I was just like, geez, man, just growing up in a different decade can change your outlook on life and change your outcome so much.
Yeah.
Because as a teacher nowadays, if you see a kid with urine soaked clothes, you're going to assume, you're going to call the parents. Well, she said they didn't have a phone, so they were able to fly under the radar. But
Right.
you'd at least do some kind of welfare check or presume maybe a little bit, like at least a little bit suspicious of neglect when it's a hygiene issue. She does mention it a lot that it was a piece of it was race. So it's one of those things where it's kind of like, I think about implicit bias, whether they were just like assuming that because she's Black, then she's just dirty.
The school kids very much did that. There's a part where she talks about how they wouldn't drink after the water fountain after her.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, nobody cares because they're just like, oh, they're the other, you know?
Yeah.
That's typical of them, or if that was the assumption, you know. And it was so sad when she said that it was like her favorite teacher. She kind of told her to get away because she smelled. It's just so sad, but
It's heartbreaking.
yeah. So it's one of those things where I'm like, wow, it's not even the nurse noticed, because that's a health concern.
Right. Or did they just not care?
Yeah. When you have intrinsic bias with people, you know, you either assume that it's because poor them, it's because of their circumstances, versus poor them, it's their own fault.
Oh, wow.
You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're already seeing a certain community that it's like, oh, that community is, well, she talks about racism when she lived in her other apartment when she was older. Her landlord didn't want any of her boyfriends to rape her. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Like, why are you even
So it's one of those
thinking
things.
that?
Yes, where you just kind of unconsciously assume that it's their fault. It's something they're doing wrong. That's why they're dirty.
Wow.
As opposed to questioning what's going on at home.
When you, as a person, have a reaction to something, it's time for you to check in with yourself if you have intrinsic bias or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Culture is more than race. It's a culture of poverty. That's a shared experience among all people that are poor or po.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting too, because once you know better, you have to do better. And I think that that is sometimes a responsibility that people just like don't want to take on.
Yeah. I mean, it is a big responsibility. You know, this is why people feel like, you know, white guilt.
Yeah.
We talked about that a lot in my classes. I had a lot of white students in my class, but we learned about culture and things like that, and they actually discovered and reflected on their own biases or their own privilege. Then they ended up feeling despair. So I get that. It's one of those things where it's like, oh my God, I'm part of the problem, or I contributed to it in some small way. Yeah. But then now it's kind of the responsibility of helping, and you're just overwhelmed. You don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I get that, where when you realize what the problem is, and now that you know, it's your responsibility to do something about it. But what can I do?
Right.
The problem is so big.
Right. And it can feel paralyzing almost.
Yes. And nobody likes to feel powerless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then we retreat.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your time with CPS? And I know that you didn't spend a lot of time doing this because it was a very difficult thing to do. I don't know if everybody knows exactly like just the basics of what CPS does and what its hopes are.
Well, contextually, I work for CPS in Texas, and so it's very different from state to state because of the laws. Okay. For example, the laws in Texas, I mean, it's stricter, but I worked in the conservatorship unit, which is where basically the children become wards of the state. So It's basically parents that have allegedly committed some sort of abuse or neglect, and then the state takes custody of the children and we put them in foster homes. And at that point, then we come up with a plan. So the ultimate goal of CPS is always family reunification. People see them as the bad guy and they're spun as the bad guy in the media as separating families, and of course going to focus on the failures of CPS. But we were always told that our goal is always to reunify the family and to provide resources. This is what it's for. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those circumstances, it was purely circumstantial. It was because of poverty.
Yeah.
It was drilled into our brains to be aware of societal and socioeconomic factors and racial factors and things like that, and to think about that. But the thing is, the system is not great. The system that we have, the intentions are there, but the system is not great. So I would work with families where I would feel so horrible, and I would be their caseworker. And I would have to visit the kids in foster homes, but the caseloads were massive. You'd have over 100 kids on your case, and you have to see every kid every month. So if you're able to see them all, you see them for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Because they're all over Houston, and you're just making sure that they're not being abused or neglected by their foster parents, which sometimes happens.
Right.
The system is kind of, in a way, stacked against the parents as well. So when they try to intervene earlier, before they take custody of the kids, we basically create like a family plan. And this is how it was like a decade ago. So I'm not sure if it's the same, but we'd come up with a family plan and a treatment goals and things like that. And so we'd basically be like, parents have to go to parenting classes. You have to complete therapy. And then we'd set them up with resources. But the thing is, these parents are in survival mode. So if you're imagining they can't make ends meet and they have to go to work, but now they have to disrupt their work to go to therapy to get their kids back. You have to create a pretty robust plan for them to get their kids back, to earn their kids back in a sense. But at the same time, it's so disruptive to their lives that it sometimes felt like we were stacking the odds against them. And then we'd have to go to court. And then the parents would have to come to court, and we'd have to show the progress or lack of progress. The purpose of court is to see if they're going to terminate your rights as a parent. And so they'd go, and I'd have to talk my parents down, because I would tell them, I'm so sorry. I feel for you, because they'd lose an entire day of work because the docket time would be 6 a.m. You don't get your case heard until 2. You've lost an entire work day. That matters.
Right.
And how did they had to take the bus to get there. So it's one of those things where the expectations were somewhat unrealistic. And I've had parents before decide to relinquish their rights because they felt like they couldn't do it. So they gave up to the rights to the kids, and I would try to talk them out of it. But honestly, that's because they had kinship placement. So some people are lucky enough to have like a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle that they could place the kids with. So then they felt like at least they're with family.
Yeah.
But the saddest is when the parents would actually ultimately decide that, you know what, I'm not giving my kid the best life and I have to let go. And that's when I would really feel bad for them, because these people aren't evil. It really is. It's just the circumstances that they're in, and they just can't get out of it.
Right. There's no pulling on bootstraps to get out of this. There's no working the fourth job. And I think that's what makes me feel so frustrated on the political level, when people don't want to raise minimum wage, or when they want to cut funding to these government programs. There just feels like there's such a lack of compassion, or just like perspective. And Viola gives such great anecdotal evidence of what it is like to grow up in these circumstances. Mm-hmm. You can't dispute her life story. This happened to her. And these stories elicit empathy and compassion. Mm-hmm. It's such an uphill battle for so many people for circumstances that are completely out of their control. What you're born into, or something completely tragic happens to you.
I mean, and honestly, like for me, I don't see it as a problem where people are taking advantage of the system in that sense. I'm just kind of.
Well, that's what people say, right? To like vote for.
Yeah, but I feel like it's honestly a problem of the bureaucracy. You create this huge bureaucracy, but you're poorly regulating it, so then people can take advantage of it. So I'm like, don't hate the player, hate the game. It's one of those things where it's like, what do you think if people are really, 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 really poor? They're going to try to get everything they can for free.
Yeah.
If your regulations are so terrible that you're not even vetting out people's information, that's your own fault. Because now you're wasting resources for people that need it as well. It's also poor regulation of those programs, mismanagement of funds at the administrative level. Don't blame the poor people. If you're going to give it to them, they're going to take it.
Right.
And it's so easy, then I want some.
And it also feels like such a surface way of handling like a systemic issue.
Yeah. Throw some money at it.
Yeah. Speaking of systemic issues, Viola goes into a lot more depth in this memoir, and it's incredibly eye-opening. She gives a lot of anecdotes, like I said, but she provided one story that I wanted to include. She talks about being made to watch a film in her class about slavery with pictures of Black people living in slave quarters down in the South. And she writes, everyone laughed when the images came up and the voiceover said, Black people are slaves at this time. We're illiterate. That means they couldn't read or write. The kids laughed and whispered, you N-words can't do anything. And Viola has way too many stories, including the N-word, unfortunately. She continues, I stayed after class to ask my teacher one question. Miss, it's not true, is it? Black people could read and write. They could, couldn't they? She shook her head sadly and said, no, I'm sorry, honey, they couldn't. I left with my head down. She never explained to me or to the class that it was illegal during slavery to teach the enslaved to read or write. It was a way to keep them subjugated. People aren't getting the whole truth.
And they're kids, so they're going to think these are the small little...
Kids aren't critically thinking. They're not going to think, oh, I wonder why Black people couldn't read or write.
Yeah, you could have just said something as simple as like, they weren't taught to,
Yeah, and I feel like the teacher was part of the problem in this situation. She talks a lot more about the way that she grew up, and then she discovers acting, and it is her escape. She writes about seeing Miss Cicely Tyson in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. She writes, my heart stopped beating, the shame, pain, fear, confusion, all these negative feelings I had about my life and my situation were blasted through a brand new doorway. It was like a hand reached for mine, and I finally saw a way out. I experienced the true power of artistry. How Miss Tyson transformed from 18 to 110 years old was supernatural. I wanted to be supernatural. I wanted my life to mean something. This was it. I finally found it. You've quoted this before, but she writes, when you haven't had enough to eat, when your electricity and heat are cut off, you're not afraid when someone says life is going to be hard. The fear factor was minimized for me. I already knew my fear. My dreams were bigger than my fear.
It's sad because dreaming is becoming more and more of a privilege for people as opposed to a norm, Because now I feel like so many people are struggling financially and they don't feel like they're where they should be in life. When you think of the hierarchy of needs, you're going to meet your basic needs first before you think about your passions. And so if people feel like their basic needs are at risk, maybe they're not as strong as Viola, where they're dreaming bigger than that. Maybe they have people relying on them where they can't dream like that. They have to survive.
Her survival instincts actually kick in when she's in college, and she goes to Rhode Island, and she decides to major in English because she wants stability. She wants security. She writes, I felt that if I did not go to college, if I did not get a degree, if I was not excellent, then my parents' reality would become my own. There was no gray area. Either you achieved or failed. I had no understanding that I possessed the tools to dig my way out if I somehow made a mistake. I had no understanding that there would be hard times and then joy would come, or sometimes the shoe would fall, but failing isn't permanent. None of that emotionally healthy thinking was instilled in me. Viola was able to just be 100% responsible for herself. She didn't have other mouths to feed. She didn't have other people relying on her. I mean, she kind of did, because actually when she starts having some success, and she even works multiple jobs while she's in college, and she does give money to her family, but ultimately she could choose to go for her dreams because she's already experienced being poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
Like, I think in her opinion, there really was only one direction, and that was up.
Yeah.
Okay, so she talks about being a Black woman at Juilliard and then later in Hollywood. We're going to start with Juilliard. She writes, everyone was geared towards molding and shaping you into a perfect white actor. Let me use my training and technique to make you forget I'm Black. The extent of the obstacles is way more burdensome than the obstacles placed in front of my white counterparts. White students just had to show up and be good. There was no transforming to make you believe that this Rhode Islander could actually be a Russian in a play by a Russian playwright. They simply only had to be white. She talks about how when they would do a play, like a time period piece, that all of her classmates would often remark how cool it would be to live in a different time. The play was taking place in like the 1700s. And she was like, I would be a slave if we lived in this time.
Yeah.
Are people not getting that? She writes that there were only 30 Black students out of the 856 in various disciplines at Juilliard during this time. And they all banded together to create the Black Caucus and created an MLK celebration, even though they were told not to, and they were not supported. She writes, we were told it would ruin our instrument using jazz, gospel, tap, modern dance. Well, our soul was our instrument too. So I do love that she was able to find this small group of Black people to come together, and it feels like she's really standing up for herself as a Black woman specifically in a way that she wasn't able to do as a child because she's a child.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about going to Africa. She goes to the Gambia during a summer while at Juilliard and she is transformed. She writes that it busted a hole in her existence, which just sounds incredible. She writes, Africa made me giddy with joy. Every smell, sound, color affected my senses in a passionate way. Beautiful dark skin was unapologetically darkened by the sun. This trip to Africa really ignited something in her soul and made her excited to chase that artistry again. So when she graduates Juilliard, she heads to Hollywood and she writes this about her experience there. She writes, almost every role I auditioned for were drug addicted mothers. I auditioned for a few roles that were low budget for a woman of color, but all of them were described as light skinned. All. What made it worse is that it's not just presented by white executives, but also Black artists and producers. You're being taught to adopt the ideology of the oppressor. It becomes the key to success. Culturally speaking, many believe it, and they have adopted the belief that if you are dark, you're uglier, harder, more masculine, more maternal than your lighter skinned counterparts. Hollywood already tries to like label you as one thing and is not very imaginative. The fact that like you're supposed to be this chameleon, you're an actress, you can kind of play a teenage like drug addict, but then you can also play like the girl next door cheerleader. Like you can do both because guess what? Those people look like all sorts of people in real life. It is really interesting how we seem to have like a very narrowed scope of what someone is based solely on their physical appearance.
The whole colorism thing, man, that exists in the Asian culture too, big time. So in Asian culture, or at least in Vietnamese culture, considered lower class if you're dark skinned. And if you're very, very white skinned, you are considered beautiful. And it's almost like a weird beauty standard. Yeah, because it's almost like I feel like it's so insidious, but somehow the Western beauty standard has seeped into Asian culture. The colonizers, the French colonizers in Vietnam, because even in Vietnamese culture, they value somebody who's very pale, has larger eyes, and smaller nose. Like Vietnamese people naturally have kind of a big nose, not really big, but like a nose with a bridge. They're like, "Ooh, you're pretty because you have a nose with a bridge." I'm like, well, that's atypical for Asians, but it's very typical for colonizers. It's one of those things where it's like somehow it seeped itself in and they don't even realize it, because now I kind of told my mom that I'm like, I don't even know what a beautiful traditional Vietnamese woman looks like, because everyone you tell me that's pretty is because they look Western. Yeah. The colorism is basically like if you're dark skinned, you're low class because you had to work in the fields.
Isn't it so strange? I know this isn't a new concept. Isn't it so bizarre that we literally judge people just based on what they look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the brain's lazy, right? Brain shortcuts.
Crazy to me to make these
Yeah.
assumptions over just
Yeah.
melatonin.
Yeah, but it's like people are born darker, man. It's not because they're out in the sun.
Oh, I know.
They're just born with different shades of color.
Right. It's like, come on.
So it's at least in our generation, we can kind of see it as silly, but it's like this is the messaging we hear.
It is. And unfortunately, it's the messaging that is still passed on. To kind of take a step back when your mom says these things and be like, that's ridiculous. But like, not everybody has the wherewithal that you do.
And then you end up internalizing it, feeling ugly like Viola did. She wasn't told she was beautiful until she was, in college?
Yeah.
When that one guy was like, what? Y'all are beautiful. What are you talking about? Like told her and her sister they were beautiful. And she was like, what?
Yeah. I think that might have been in high school, but yeah. So she is 42 years old when she gets Oscar nominated in Doubt. She calls it her coming out role. And she credits luck, talent, and preparation, which I really do appreciate because we all know that Viola Davis is talented as fuck, seriously. Mm-hmm. But she talks a lot in the book about how much luck plays a role in becoming a working actor, a famous working actor. There are really incredibly talented people who you don't know their names because they never got that breakout role. There's a lot of luck involved. She writes that she wrote a 100-page biography for her character in Doubt, which is a one scene character. I mean, it's a hell of a scene, but isn't that crazy?
That's so crazy.
Yeah, because you didn't get to this part yet. So
just to breathe life into the character.
She wanted to give as much background, make her as real as to herself as Viola could. And she still wasn't happy with her performance.
Wow.
Which is Oscar nominated, by the way. She talks about how all of the actors, we're talking Meryl Streep, Amy Adams, Philip Seymour Hoffman, they all experienced major imposter syndrome when they were making this movie. I thought that that was really refreshing to hear because you think when people reach the pinnacle of success, I mean, all of these people are household names, they're Oscar nominees, they're making really good money. You think that at a certain point, they're just like, oh, yeah, I got this. And it's a reminder to all of us that everyone second guesses themselves sometimes. So then she talks about the help and she writes about the juxtaposition of this incredible set environment, the amazing egoless women that she's collaborating with, a wonderful director, and the location, which is Greenwood, where they found Emmett Till's body. It's close to the birthplace of the White Citizens Council, and it was near a hotbed of the KKK. And she talks about how the location was a character in itself and that it just really fed, especially for the Black actors with the history, it just really fed a lot of the performances. But her husband, Julius, who we'll circle back to, he would booby trap their hotel every night in fear of their safety. I can't imagine being on a set, a multi-million dollar set like that. That was a studio picture and feeling unsafe. I think it's really interesting that they chose to film it there. And I wonder if anybody ever thought to check in with their Black actors and just have a conversation about it. She doesn't allude to that. That's just a question that popped into my mind. Lately, like in the past few years, she's actually been very vocal about the help and how she feels some of the narratives are missing. And she disagrees with her character's motivations and some of the actions and felt that it was kind of like a Black story told through like whitewashed eyes. I think it's really cool that she's able to speak up about these things now because she does have a platform. I think sometimes reflecting on your past is a really good way of stepping forward and moving into a different future. And I think it's really necessary. And I just think it's kind of really badass of her to kind of say, you know what, when I made this film, I was in a different place, but now I'm able to kind of say, I didn't really agree with the way that some of these things were handled. Her character refuses the money at the end of the film.
Mhm.
And she's like, my character would have never refused the money. My character needed that money. She would take the money. And then she talks a lot about how to get away with murder. So she writes that though she was critically acclaimed, that the right roles just weren't coming until she's offered Annalise Keating by Shonda Rhimes. Okay, this was crazy. So a friend of hers calls her and tells her what people are saying behind her back when she's rumored for the role. Her friend was working in the theater at the time in New York. And she writes, many of the Black males and Black females in the cast were saying, there's no way that show is going to work with Viola Davis in the lead. There's no way it's going to work. She's not pretty enough. She's not feminine enough. She doesn't turn me on. Okay, would you want your friend to tell you this?
You know, I kind of would, but then I'm also like, so the more mature me wants people to tell me, but then who I really am, the child, is kind of like, but it would really hurt me.
Yeah.
And all the doubt would come back.
It was so strange because it's just like, what does Viola knowing this information do for Viola? Obviously, it
Yeah.
kind of fueled her, I think. So maybe the friend knew that it would. Viola was definitely sort of on the fence about taking this because she wasn't sure if people would buy her as a sexy woman. I thought that was really weird. Like, hey, these people were talking shit about you behind your back. Do you want to hear it? Because I'm like you, I'd be
Yeah.
like, no.
I was like, oh, just give me a
But
little
also,
bit.
what are they saying?
Yes.
Tell me what they're saying.
Maybe Cliff's Note it.
And that's basically what she's been battling against all of her career as a Black woman, and specifically a Black woman with dark skin. Just these prejudices that people just painted her to be one way and didn't realize that, she's a complete three-dimensional human and
Yeah.
can do all sorts of things, not just play drug addicted mothers.
Yeah. This is why it's important that she's the one to do it.
Yeah,
Because people like her or people that are dark skinned are not seen as sexy because we don't expose them as sexy. We don't portray them as sexy. So people need to do it to get used to it
exactly.
because we're constantly fed the same thing over and over. And then we think that that's
Yeah.
reality. But when I saw her in that role, I thought she was
Yeah.
awesome and beautiful and sexy. So I'm just kind of like, wow, I don't get the other side of it because I only know her in that role and I loved it.
Right.
I thought she was powerful and intelligent, so I'm just like, I don't get it.
Viola writes, the 8-year-old girl who had never been told you're beautiful, you're worthy, suddenly found herself as a mouthpiece for all the women who looked like her. I had no weapons to slay those naysayers, to change culture itself. The obstacle blocking me was a 400-year-old racist system of oppression and my own feeling of utter aloneness. My art, in this instance, was the best healing tool to resolve my past, the best weapon I had to conquer my present, my gift to the future. I love that. I think that art can open people's eyes and can shift people's point of view and can help people gain perspective and can help people feel seen and understood. I love that she was given this opportunity and she took it and she obviously killed it. She won her Emmy for it. It's one of the reasons why she's an EGOT. But there is a responsibility that I think some people can take on, and she's definitely the right person to take that on because she's just really good too. Somebody without her skill set would have been like, yeah, I'm going to show people that I can be sexy, but then like they're not a very good actor and like you don't believe it. That would not
Yeah.
be very good. So luckily,
Yeah.
luckily it was Viola Davis that this fell onto the shoulders of. Okay, so before we do some final quotes, I just want to talk a little bit about her husband. Their story is really sweet. You didn't get to read this part. So before she met her husband, she wanted a partner, but she felt she had more work to do in therapy. She writes, I had to clean things up before I can invite anyone into my life to love me, which I really loved the idea of cleaning things up. So her friend says to her, okay, think of the perfect partner and write it in a list to God. Do you remember Practical Magic where Sandra Bullock? It's like the opposite. Sandra
Yeah.
Bullock's like, I can't fall in love because they'll die or whatever because of the Beatles or whatever. So
Yeah.
she writes like this list of a person who just like can't exist and then he does. Well, Viola writes a list of everything she wants and then she meets her husband Julius and he checks off every single box in a very magical God gift sort of way.
She manifested
She
it.
manifested it. She talks about how she wanted somebody who already had children
Wow.
and he had children. And she talks about a very specific physique. She wanted a guy who was from the South and maybe played football. Julius is from the
Ooh.
South and he played football. I mean, it was like really cool. And
Mhm.
it was just a simple reminder that sometimes you do need to ask for things from the universe, manifest things, whatever you believe. But deep down, you have to believe that you're worthy of it.
Yeah, like you deserve it to even ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was really sweet. Okay, so we're going to end on some thought provoking quotes to discuss. She writes, this is what she opens her book with this quote, and it's by Anton Chekhov, who I studied a lot in college. The quote is, I think human beings must have faith or must look for faith. Otherwise, our life is empty, empty, to live and not know why the cranes fly, why children are born, why there are stars in the sky. You must know why you are alive, or else everything is nonsense, just blowing in the wind.
Lovely.
I think we've touched on this a lot, but obviously Viola's journey and in writing this memoir was figuring out why.
Yeah.
We've talked about finding purpose and all that stuff. And this quote just kind of like encapsulates all of that in a really poetic way, in a way that a
Yeah.
playwright would write it.
Yeah. I think that's not even like faith because you can have faith in so many things. It may not be like a deity, but it is true.
Yeah.
Like he who has a why can endure anyhow.
Ooh, I like
So
that.
yeah.
He who has a why can endure anyhow. I love that.
Because it is a sense of purpose because some people don't believe in God or they may be atheists, but they do believe in the universe and
Yeah.
the universality of experience and being part of something big. So I think it's more
Or
so
just like kindness. They just like
yeah.
believe in kindness.
Yeah, and even with the universe, the idea of like every action has a reaction, and it's kind of like you cause the ripples, and so
Yeah.
you got to believe in something bigger than yourself. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also look at this quote and, the word why comes up a lot. Why cranes fly, why children are born, why there are stars in the sky. I think questioning things is so important in life. I think that's how you find deeper meaning. I think that's how you have a deeper life. Critical thinking is really important.
Hmm.
It also reminds me of I recently stumbled across this article that was kind of talking about how to help yourself when you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, especially with everything that's going on in the world right now. And it says to find moments of awe in the daily things around you, to really stop and look at a leaf in a way a child is in awe because they're experiencing things and seeing things for the first time, these things that now by our age we've seen and done a million times, but to stop and think and look at things as though you're experiencing it for the first time or really see it in a way that you haven't seen. And you can cultivate awe, and it was proven to make you happier.
I can imagine that. I don't know. This is one of the things that I love about kids, that childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah. Okay. So the next quote is this is about her marriage. She writes, With both of us, like any human being, the nicks, the obstacles, and scrapes still threaten. Little crumbs from the past come, memories that still carry some weight and power. They show up in anxiety filled dreams. They show up at Thanksgiving when I cook too much food and he cleans within an inch of his life. But it's a matter of recognizing what stems from my childhood, being aware and not letting it control us.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that so big?
Yeah, that's just the constant work of being an adult and a partner to somebody,
Yeah.
and it's owning that work because I still have to do that all the time. And sometimes you just run out of fuel.
Yeah.
And that's when the breakdowns happen. But it's constant work. It's constantly a battle of teasing out what is really me, what is my mom's voice, what is my
Mm.
own experience, and my past coming out. It's so true because the most innocuous thing can trigger something that makes you feel like it's something else.
Right. And it's giving yourself grace to like not beat yourself up about it, but also acknowledging what it is and
Mm-hmm.
trying hard to work through it, but just communication is so key. Having
Very.
that moment and then going to your partner and saying, "Hey, I know that that seemed like a small thing to you, but really this is what it triggered in me and I just wanted to let you know and let's move forward from this together on the same page."
Mm-hmm.
It's just about being on the same page and communication.
Yeah, and just having, being human and having the humility to admit it, because sometimes the
Yeah.
pride gets in the way.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I do have to apologize and be like, I'm so sorry I reacted to that because it felt like this, but it wasn't
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And having your partner give you grace as well, like understanding you well enough to be like, "Ooh, that's not her, that's her stuff."
That's
That's her stuff coming out. Like you sound like your mom right now, although they could never
don't
say that in those
ever
words.
say that.
Or say calm down.
Oh, calm down and relax. Oh boy, if you tell me that,
It's
I will do
on.
the
It's on.
opposite. You
Yeah,
just
but
invited a whole can of whoop ass. Okay.
this is what I mean when I say sometimes that, sometimes we're not difficult partners, we're just special needs. We are special needs and we need the right person that just understands that and maybe gives us grace in those moments to be ugly
Yeah.
and because they know that we're going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what a true partnership is. It's still loving people through the muck and the mess and the ugliness.
Hmm.
Especially like you said, people like us who are self aware will hopefully have the humility. I mean, I definitely have to work on my apologizing. I do eventually, but it's hard for me, girl.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard.
So
It ain't
hard.
easy. Sometimes I wish I could just write it and like pass a little note. Like, do I have to say it out loud?
Wait. Could we try that actually?
Like, here's a little tucks in your pocket.
Genius. That's,
I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
Sorry.
Yeah, or I do the Asian apology where you don't really apologize, but you like fix them some food or do something nice, like a little
The
random act of
gesture.
service.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's sweep it under the rug. Let's do what my parents did. Oh
Oh
God.
man. Oh man. Yeah. God. Okay, this is totally off topic, but did you ever watch the movie Love Story?
Oh, I don't think so.
The like popular quote from it is love means never having to say you're sorry.
Wrong.
So
Wrong.
wrong.
Antiquated.
Absolutely like opposite of that. Love means always say you're sorry.
That is so one-sided and so
I
unhealthy.
know. I know.
But it's very idealistic,
It
it's a very romanticized
it
idea.
really is. One
But that's
one
not reality.
one that explains a lot about certain generations of people, I guess.
Yes.
All right. So this is a short one. She writes, free from the chains of my excuses, I was handling my agency instead of sitting around and doing nothing. The imagery of chains of my excuses, because that's exactly what your excuses
Ah,
are.
yeah. And the thing is, she wants so badly and she knows in her ability to
Yeah.
do it, but then she always reverts back to, I was a shy kid. I was so
Yeah. Fear,
awkward. She
man.
mentions that so many times, but yeah, fear is crippling.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last quote that I want to discuss is towards the end of her book. She has a friend that's kind of like, how did you claw your way out of poverty to where you are today, Viola? Like, and she writes, the question still echoes. How did I claw my way out? There is no out. Every painful memory, every mentor, every friend and foe served as a chisel, a leap pad that has shaped me. The imperfect but blessed sculpture that is Viola is still growing and still being chiseled. My elixir, I'm no longer ashamed of me. I own everything that has ever happened to me. The parts that were a source of shame are actually my warrior fuel. I see people, the way they walk, talk, laugh, and grieve, and their silence in a way that is hyper focused because of my past. I'm an artist because there's no separation from me and every human that has passed through the world, including my mom. I have a great deal of compassion for people, but mostly myself. That would not be the case if I did not reconcile that little 8-year-old girl and find me.
What a way to end it. I think it's just so beautiful how she, through her own work, then she sees not only herself, but she sees others and she has a sense of empathy. I think this is why it's so important to have diverse experience, to know other people's stories and not be stuck in your bubble, because you learn so much through interacting with others, and to have compassion to just try to understand. I think that's what we kind of lack nowadays. We are so quick to make snap judgments and write people off, like especially cancel culture. I freaking hate cancel culture. It's one of those things that it's like, well, if you don't believe people can change, then what the hell's the point? Then how are you going to change the world then? Because the world is made of people, and you got to change their minds. And, are people just so hard? They're so hard in their stances about certain beliefs, but it's like, well, then you're not going to have a dialogue with anybody to reach an understanding. Then you want to be right, or you want to have a relationship.
Right, right. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast. It was important for me to read other women's stories and their experiences and talk to the wonderful women in my life about our shared experience of being a woman in today's world and what that means and what that looks like and what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
It's been so interesting to me. Almost every memoir that I've read, a woman has an abortion story. Viola has an abortion story. Almost every memoir that I've read, women have talked about sexual violence, whether they are perceiving it as a peripheral threat, whether it's happened directly to them, whether it's happened to someone that they love. We are all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I love finding the connections and seeing the differences and just gaining insight and perspective and empathy and compassion. I mean, this was such an incredible chat that I had with you today. I really appreciate it. I'm here for it,
Yeah. I feel like we're kind of at a turning point, because I feel like women now are very much on each other's team. We're seeing that shift in our generation. So it's actually quite empowering.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking about this book with me today. I feel like Viola just really in the memoir demonstrates the amount of effort and work that sometimes it takes when you're on your path to self-discovery, but it's so important. We all have our traumas and we all have our shit, and we can let them hold us back, or we can have compassion for ourselves and try to find a better path forward and hopefully find that inner strength. She shows so much grace, and she provides an insight and an education on how systemic racism has shaped our society today and been really relevant in her life. I felt like this was just a beautiful, moving, thought-provoking book by one hell of a lady.
Yeah, it's just her story is just, you can't make this shit up. It's crazy. It's just so, she's just such an amazing person, and the family dynamic and how they survive together. I don't know. It's just a really, really cool story.
I agree. Thank you again, Anae.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for listening. You just listened to an extended episode of Babes in Bookland. Thank you so much for your support.